Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Brant County Council of July the 27th, 2021. First thing on our agenda is the attendance. We have to take attendance. I'm going to call out each councillor's name and you're going to answer here if you are. Councillor Wheat.
Present.
Councillor McAlpine.
Present.
Councillor LaFerriere.
Here.
Councillor Howes.
Here.
Councillor Bell.
Here.
Councillor Pierce.
Here.
Councillor Chambers.
Right here.
Yep. Councillor Miller.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Here.
And Councillor Gatward.
Present.
Thank you. We're all here. Second thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, noting that 4.1 has been taken off our agenda. The presentation with Paul Emerson and David McNeil has been changed. They're going to come and present to us some other time in the future. Any additions to the agenda? Seeing none. Councillor Gatward.
It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor LaFerriere. No, sorry, Councillor Bell, that the agenda be approved as printed.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declaration of pecuniary interests. Councillor Gatward.
No, I was just adjusting my screen.
All right, I have a pecuniary interest in 13.1, which is the first item in camera. I'll be taking the oath of with you people, and then I'll be taken out of the session and back for 13.2, and then the remainder of in camera. So, any other pecuniary interests? Seeing none, we'll move
Mayor
on
Bailey?
to, yes, sir.
I've got one for one of the in cameras as well.
All right. Do you just want to just leave it at that until we're sworn in?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Number 4 is our delegations, as I said. Hello? Did someone say something? Okay. We're going to move on then to 4.2, which is Judy. Where's Judy? From Wolverton House. She wants to speak to council. Welcome, Judy.
She's still connecting right now.
I'll move in here. Yeah, here. I'll move over. Can you see me now? Can you see me now?
I see your name.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
To you. Okay. Oh my God.
Judy, I have to tell you that Wolverton House looks awfully haunted right now.
I know. I don't know why, because the windows aren't behind me.
Right.
Shall I leave myself as the ghost? Yeah. Is that better?
That's better. We can sort of see you. You're a little foggy, but we get the drift.
So, yeah, there we are.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You can begin whenever you like.
Well, I'm sure as everybody has probably figured out by now, the Wolverton House is going up for sale. We have reason. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay. For reasons, we're moving on to another historic project. When we came to Paris, it was to restore a historic property. We had looked at the Wolverton House for 25 years, and that's when we finally bit the bullet, bought the house. It was almost condemned, and we've gone from structural to all the plumbing, electrical, the roof. Everything is to code. Everything is exact as it should be to continue for another 150 years, including all the floor cloths, wall covers, et cetera, et cetera. It's no secret that we ran a successful bed and breakfast since the time we moved in. And it's no secret that the tea room, when it was launched in 2014, took off. Both businesses have earned approximately $60,000 a year. We've had a lot of bed and breakfast guests launch their kayaks, canoes, water sports from our shoreline. We've set up a little cabin out there that we've enjoyed watching animals, et cetera, et cetera. So at this time, we are very saddened to see that a lot of the people coming to Paris from out of town, mostly Toronto, Hamilton, Burlington, have no respect for the heritage or the history of Paris at this time. So we're proposing that Brant County seriously consider taking over the Wolverton House to expose the history of our town, to bring some tourism front forward, and offer it to something like the museum to do house tours, which was one of the reasons the tea room started in the first place. Even to this day, we've been closed 2 years on the tea room. We get approximately 5 to 10 calls per day, still wanting to come in, still wanting to have tea, still wanting to see the house, and wanting to know the history of the people that lived here, lived in Paris, and more history on our community. So it would make sense that the county would expose this to all of those coming in. It's no secret that Paris has become a definite destination on the map. And what better place than the Wolverton House, which is right across the road from the Old Town Hall, on the river, and certainly walking distance to our downtown area. I don't know what else to say at this point, other than it is a grand opportunity for the county to make money. At least minimum 100,000 a year. And parking is not an issue. I know at the beginning with the tea room it was. Now you've got the Old Town Hall across the road, which is virtually sitting there with bricks falling off. I watch that Old Town Hall day in and day out. I'm looking at it right now as we speak. It is dead. It is a dead elephant, and it's going to take years and millions and millions and millions to get that building to code and operating the way Paris has planned it to be. So what better way to start than to put the Wolverton House on the map and then go after the Old Town Hall for whatever purposes they have, which is now deemed the Bucket Center.
Are you finished, Judy?
Well, I don't know what else there is to say, unless you have some questions for me. I don't know what else I can add to it. You've got the report in front of you that I have sent in with the original papers that I set forth, and it kind of explains it all.
Okay, that's fine. What we usually do now, Judy, is we open it up for questions for council.
Okay.
And you're able to answer questions for us if anyone has any.
Okay.
All right, let's do that. Are there any questions for Judy? Councillor Miller, you're first, please.
Just one quick comment, Mr. Mayor. I will like to say through you to Judy, looking at those pictures that you had distributed to us, you guys have done a remarkable job, so I think you need to be commended. Have you tried yet or no? Or was this your first foray into looking to sell it? Have you tried the private market? And what has been the results thus far?
Well, I did try it for 8 weeks. I obviously hired the wrong real estate agent who didn't have the time to focus on finding the right buyer. There were a lot of interest, but they wanted me to whitewash the interior, get rid of all the history from the inside. People wanted to take down walls, basically bastardize the history of this home. I will not do that. I will not sell to somebody who is going to take out any of the history. Asa Wolverton built this house in 1851. It had certain values. The house has characters that are going to be deemed historic through the Ontario Archive or Architectural Archives of Ontario. And the Heritage Trust Foundation is also going to be designating features of the house like the faux artwork in the fireplace and wall panels in the dining room, the floor cloths, the ceiling panels. So as far as going into real estate, I'm afraid of what kind of people could come forth and what they're prepared to do. The pictures that I did send you to have a view at, that's the way we bought the house. That's the way the house is going to return to. People want to turn this into apartments. They want to commercialize it. I don't want to see that happen. This house is too important to the history of Paris to have it bastardized.
Yeah,
Thanks,
okay,
Judy.
thank you. Okay, so you've given it 8 weeks. I'm just wondering if there's not somebody, I think it's not as easy as maybe selling the typical residential house, but I'm just wondering if you couldn't find the right buyer who would purchase it as a going concern, because you expressed you wrote to us about the business case that could be made for it. So I'm just wondering if 8 weeks is enough. That's all I'm wondering, Judy, but I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Well, it's been more than 8 weeks. It's just 8 weeks that we had the sign on the property, and there were more people curious about coming in and seeing the historic house as opposed to actually wanting to buy the historic house. And with the kinds of people that are moving into Paris right now, East Indians and Asians will not come near this house. They don't understand it. They want big, they want new, they want homes that their families can move into. No fuss, no muss. This house is not what they want. And that seems to be the big attraction to our community right now.
Thank you, Judy. Are there any other questions? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Judy. A couple things. First of all, I'll concur with Councillor Miller. The way that the place looks is fantastic, and you absolutely should be commended for getting it into the shape it is today, considering the way that you purchased it. So personally, thank you, and thank you on behalf of a lot of people that have been there, obviously. Couple things. You made the statement that with the tea room and the different bed and breakfasts and such you had, you said a couple different numbers. You said they each make about 30,000 a year, and then you said 100,000 a year. So first of all, I want to get clarification on that. So between the bed and breakfast and the tea room, is it 60,000 a year or closer to 100,000 a year?
It is about 30-30 with the tea room and the bed and breakfast. The reason I said 100,000, I ran it part-time only. I only ran the tea room as 3 or 4 groups at a time. There's a capacity of more than that, but I couldn't do that according to the Board of Health. I was only allowed 10 people in at a time because of the parking that I had. I only had 2 driveways and 1 parking spot in the front of the house. If we had ample parking, I could obviously have more than that and ramp the business up as high as 100,000. At this point, there was 1 or 2 events a year that I did have up to 160 people served in 2 days.
Okay.
That's twice or 3 times a week. If that was possible, then of course the numbers would go higher.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. So let's even go on the low end of the 60,000. That's fine. And then, I walk by there quite often, and I did see the for sale sign up there. What I'm curious to understand here is, I appreciate the fact of you coming to council and wanting to keep the historic factor in that. I guess at the end of the day, as a seller, you can determine who is and who isn't going to purchase that property, which is fine. But number one, why are you coming to us to purchase this after you already tried it on the market? I would suggest that if you were keen on the county purchasing this property, why wouldn't you have come to us first? So I'm trying to understand your rationale behind that. To be honest, it almost looks to the point where I tried to sell it, I couldn't sell it, so now I want the county to buy it. So can you comment on that, please?
I always wanted the county to come forward and purchase it. I didn't think that it would be feasible at the time that I first put it on the market. The agent that I was dealing with at the time was a friend of 30 years. And she basically put the sign on the lot, had the offer signed. I did not want to do it that way. I was kind of talked into it, and now I have lost a 30-year friendship over this. And since I have asked her to back away, I actually had to pay her $700 to cancel that agreement. And then I went interviewing 6 or 7 agents to find the right person who could, in fact, go out and put together a marketing plan. And at that point, we spent a lot of time talking about offering it to the council, to the county, excuse me. before we even decided to put it on the market. So technically, it is not on the market right now. We will be launching a new plan in sometime in August if the council is not interested.
Okay, I guess I appreciate that explanation. That's fine. And one last one, Mr. Mayor, if I could, this is more of a comment. The comments about the Old Town Hall Bucket Center. You're saying that it's dead. There's nothing to it at this point in time because the tenant we had is gone. You're right. There's nothing happening in it at the time, and you're right. It is going to take several millions of dollars to get that to what it's going to be, and it will be what we want it to be and what this community wants it to be. So I guess it's kind of a conundrum here. Do we put millions of dollars into buying your property, or do we put millions of dollars into redoing the Bucket Center, which we already have? We don't have your property at this point in time. I think that's all I'll say from now, but thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Pierce. Councillor Ferrier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to address one thing from the letter. In the letter that we'd received, which is now a part of the official files of this meeting and will be available to the public, the speaker talks about the rumors going around that we want to sell Celebs. I just want to confirm that there's no basis to that rumor. That's never been talked about during this term of council, on or off the record, and that's never come up. And rumors have a way of flying around this community sometimes in a way that's not productive. But because it's on the record now as a rumor, I just wanted to have that debunked. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrier. Any other questions to the presenter? Seeing none, thank you, Judy. I would like to also say that you've done a remarkable job. As you know, I've sort of kept an eye on what you were doing, and you've had me in and we've looked at things, and you didn't do anything on the cheap. You did everything properly, and I understand your situation. Well, no one understands your situation any better than I do. And it's not about money at the end of the day. I've had people want to make it into my home into almost a massage parlor, and paint everything white too. So it isn't about money at the end of the day. So I understand your passion, and you've presented, and we'll see where it goes from here. Is there anything else you want to say before we're finished, Judy?
Is there a timeline that I can work with? And is there any way that if it should proceed to the next level that council could take a tour of the house before a final decision is made so that they can see actually all the detailing of the historic home as it is now? Because to see it in pictures doesn't do it justice.
That's right. After you're finished, Judy, what we'll do is I'm going to ask council what they want to do with this. And if there's any interest in having council come through it, they will give me direction, and through their direction, I will have Heather, the clerk, set up a time that we would get together with you and look at it. If not, we'll certainly get back to you and let you know how we're feeling about the whole situation. We won't leave you dangling, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. What do we want to do with this, council? Councillor Wheat?
I'll make a motion that the council of the County of Brant expresses no interest in purchasing the Wolverton house, seeking a seconder.
Councillor Bell, you're seconding it? That would bring new conversation. Is there any conversation of that before we call the vote? Councillor Chambers?
Could I ask for maybe a friendly amendment? If not friendly, then I'll move it as an amendment. Add the words "at this time" to the end of the proposed resolution.
You accept that as friendly, Councillor Wheat?
Oh, absolutely. Yep, at this time, that's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, you're still on board? Thank you. So it's Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support the resolution. Unfortunately, I think it's just being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. Having said that, is there any way our economic development staff can work with the owner to make the best options for selling it? Because these historic properties, they don't build them every day, and I would hate to lose a jewel, if somebody comes in and turns it into 8 apartments, and we have an opportunity. It takes time, but we have an opportunity to really build up a designated historic area. So I'm just wondering if this is a possibility. Do we need a motion to that effect, or is that something we can just leave with staff?
I think right now we need to call the vote. Councillor House is going to speak, and then we'll call the vote and see what happens there. And then we can give direction to staff to be in touch with Judy and move forward. Councillor House?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, yes, I don't support what Councillor Miller is suggesting, because I'm not sure it's appropriate for us to assign economic development staff who are very busy right now into helping in the marketing of a private property. At the same time, I don't want to leave Judy hanging, and I don't want her, I want, if council's not interested in pursuing the opportunity that Judy has provided, then it's best for Judy to be able to then move on to find another solution for what will hopefully be the right kind of buyer, right? And I did want to echo what the comments that were said and about what a fine job has been done on this property. When we said this when the new owners of the former Paris Variety building took the time to do a nice job on the property. And the same compliment is extended to you, Judy. I just, it's not the right time for the county to be acquiring additional municipal properties. But we do appreciate the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor House. Councillor Chambers, before we...
Yes, before you call the question, I just wanted to make a note that if councilors that were on council at the time remembered, when the old town hall was first brought up for sale, the county refused to purchase it at that time. And sometimes things change, and that's why I'm suggesting that we don't close the book, but perhaps there may be an opportunity or something come up in the future that will prompt a change in thinking on this particular property, as it did with the old town hall.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Ferrier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment on Councillor Howe's comment. I understand his point of view. By the same token, if economic development can help with, say, something very specific, like helping to connect potential folks in the tourism sector to the sale, and if they have any contacts, if it's something minor like that, I don't want them to spend weeks on reports and research and marketing. But if it's something of that nature, I think that is an appropriate use of their time if it brings economic development to the community, especially with an area that could use it, to be frank, in that general couple blocks. So I think that's something that they could do if it's limited in scope, and I'd leave that to staff to be able to do. So I actually support that piece if it's done in that way. I don't want to spend 30 hours of staff time on this, but if they have some contacts in tourism that they'd like to send and connect Judy to, that'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we have something on the floor. We have it seconded. We have a friendly amendment. If there's no other conversation, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? The question, is there anyone opposed to it as it reads? Okay. Right now, Judy, there's no interest, so you can carry on.
Thank you.
You can carry on. Thank you for your presentation.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, you can, Councillor Miller.
Came back to what Councillor Ferrier, he got the gist of what I was saying. If there's any expertise that we have in economic development to assist Judy, I'm not saying we go in and spend enormous amounts of staff time, but is there anything that they could do, because they do have a lot of expertise in that area? Is it possible that they could help her out? That is my request.
Yeah. Okay.
But maybe we could hear from staff. That's your call, obviously.
Yeah, there's other ways too. There are specialized real estate agents like Sotheby's that deal in these kinds of properties. So I mean, we'll see what happens. Allison, do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Just in response, we can certainly reach out and give Judy a comprehensive document on what can and cannot be done with a heritage property. Just that may weed out some potential buyers she's not interested in. And we can also have her connect with our new arts, culture, heritage officer, who I'm sure would have better expertise and can work with her on maybe some ideas and potential.
Great, thank you. I think that's all. I think that's all we're asking, is that she just doesn't go away without any sort of help at all from us. So that would be great, Allison. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to 4.3, which is Mark. He's coming back to talk about 129 King Street in Burford. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Can everyone hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Thumbs up if you can, yeah.
All right. What I'd like to do tonight is, again, revisit the request that we have discussed previous, the grant for the remediation of 129 King Street in Burford. And I'm going to share my screen here. Can everybody see your Corporate Development Committee report from March of 2019?
I can't.
You can't?
No.
Okay, let's see here. Let's see here. Zoom share. I just had this all queued up, so it should be.
We're not screen sharing at all right now. We've gone back to Hollywood Squares.
Okay, I've got you, and
There it is.
okay,
There
it
we
says
go.
you are screen sharing. We've got it.
Yep.
We've got it.
Okay, thank you. So we purchased a property with a vision here, understanding that there was interest in the community of revitalizing a lot of downtown Burford properties. You can see I've got my souvenir here going back to Heather Madden's Community Improvement Open House Workshop on March 22nd, 2018, which I attended. In January 21st of 2019, there was a public hearing, and as part of that public hearing under the Planning Act, the Burford Community Improvement Plan was, I guess, as I understand, it took the next step, initiating it. And the reason I reference this is I want to walk through the documents in the Corporate Development Committee report that directly align with what we did at 129 King Street relative to the property, the commitment, and in line with the actual plan that was put in place by Brant County. In 2019, January 21st, the definition, the focus of the CIP was identified as the renewal of the Burford core, and that it will be done in conjunction with other studies, notably the Burford Master Plan. As a result of that, in March of 11th of 2019, after the public meeting, I understand the CIP was adopted by council. This is a copy of the report. And some of the keys here is identifying at the top here that the council has approved the report, the background study here that you had identified WSP Consulting. And I know you gentlemen have lived through most of this. Mayor, I think this was probably done previous under Ron Eddy leadership, correct me if I'm wrong. But several other members of council I interfaced with during these meetings and obviously had input into the actual plan here. So the plan, if we look at report, the intention was to incentivize property owners and tenants who were located within the designated community improvement plan. I understand you're looking to set out a high standard for future improvement, continue positively to the unique character for each community, and further strengthen the downtown role in commercial and cultural, as a commercial and cultural focal point of the community. And I'm going to touch on some of these items because, again, we were very much conscious that this was something that Burford was committed to doing. We talk about the eligibility requirements here, establish eligibility criteria, design-related guidelines, setting a standard for aesthetics, ensure the improvements are contributing to achieving the vision, and the objectives of the downtown area. When you look at the streams that are included, and this is repeated a couple times in your project, but facade improvement and grant, we put up an entirely brand new building. We try to keep the colors and the style of the building within the scope of what is downtown so that we didn't alienate by coming in with, all glass and aluminum design or other features that we knew were not desirable. We talked to a lot of people in the community as well in regards to their thoughts. There was an upper story apartment in the building, so we did definitely improve that. We also created 3 parking spots at the back of the building. The previous ownership, it was basically grown in where you couldn't park anything back there unless you were in contravention of the easement with the Log House restaurant next door. So there are 3 parking spots created, which is very important for that segment because between the bakery and the Log House, as most people know, pretty tough to get parking there at donut time at 8 o'clock in the morning or dinner time at 5 p.m. And as well, when you look at the commercial grant, reuse grant, we basically took a building that was sitting idle and revitalized that building, which certainly is in queue for commercial use. We had a tenant, as we discussed in one of the previous meetings, that had to leave due to COVID issues. So when you walk through the details here in your plan, and we talk about the downtown design guidelines, all of the items that are identified in here directly align with what is in your plan here. If we come down to 1.2, critical components of your plan, design guidelines are a component of eligibility and private property improvements incentivized by this plan, outlined through various sections of the plan. So I'm going to go to some of the more specific areas here. So your vision, 2.1 context. So when we go to the actual development, the downtown core of Burford is situated at the junction of King and Maple Avenue. The core area extends along King Street as its main street, lined with historic buildings. Our property at 129 directly aligns with the context that was required or defined in your plan to support these types of building remediations. It also indicates there's a potential for improvement along these streets to enhance the mixed use, pedestrian-oriented character, revitalization, and maintenance. All of those items, anybody who knows this building, there were significant safety issues with that building. We had all kinds of issues with predators, different types of animals, etc. All of those items were addressed as part of our remediation efforts. Now I'm trying to move my screen over. Okay. So under the vision further, problem is I've got your screen here, but under the vision further, if we go to 2.2, it's partially blocked. But so the overall intent of the plan was to implement your downtown plan with walkable, safe, friendly for pedestrian and bicycles, a focal point of unique shops that meet the day-to-day needs of residents, visitors, and create opportunities for social interaction. That building, the way it was remediated, allowed both visitors to the restaurant, to the bakery, and those walking by a clear path now, a safe path, and far superior access to that segment of King Street in the downtown core than was there previous. The financial incentive programs. So under three financial incentive programs. So the financial incentive programs intended to encourage investment in private property. This was a privately held property, and certainly we made a significant investment with having to razz the previous building and build new with the same features, 2-story feature and structure that was there previous. It does, I think, definitely references the downtown design guidelines. And again, we stayed within those parameters with the construction materials that were available to the best of our ability. When you look at the programs that are included on the bottom, so whether it be facade improvement, upper story apartment, which we already talked on, the parking, adaptive commercial use, even the brownfield that we had discussion on previous as far as some of the contamination factors, this property certainly reflects all of those features within your financial incentive programs. Touching on the upper story apartment, 3.1.3.1, purpose of the upper story apartment improvement grant is to encourage the improvement of apartment units in the upper stories of mixed-use buildings. We all know that there's very little residential space available in Burford. We, with remediating this building, although Mr. Civic was living in that building at the end of the day, you could not rent that as a viable apartment due to numerous safety issues within the property that have been discussed previously. gaping holes in the roof, the walls, and access to the upper level with the staircase that was virtually going to collapse. In 3.1.3.2 eligible properties, only 2+ story buildings in the community improvement project area shall be eligible for the grant. Further, the ground floor of the building must be used for non-residential uses, commercial, office, or institutional. Again, the building aligns directly with the requirements of that section of the eligible properties. Under that, the eligible costs, any works in 3.1.3.4, any works in existing upper story, which bring the units into compliance with the Ontario Building Code. Cost for services of a professional engineer. So I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but the key points there are the building was in compliance. Mr. Andre Gravel and team from the Brant County building department put us through the grist mill on this building. It was inspected at every step. They did an excellent job. We ensured compliance, and Cahoon Engineering at Brantford had all the engineered drawings and inspections with the county to ensure that we met all of the requirements for those eligible costs. Section 3.1.6, adaptive commercial reuse grant. So under that purpose, we took the building for commercial purposes and the conversion of existing commercial space to other commercial uses. The grant can be helped to promote the use of vacant spaces, which are limited by structural or other building code compliance issues. Again, the grant is intended to cover required improvements to meet Ontario Building Code. All of those items were in fact in direct alignment with the requirement of your adaptive commercial reuse grant section. We also had, we basically created 2 spaces in downtown that were not available for, I think, about 6 to 7 years previous to the acquisition of the building, where the commercial space was not in use as a viable business. And yes, Mr. Civic lived in the building upstairs out of necessity. However, it was not available as a residential rental unit. Eligible properties under 3.162. Any property in the community improvement project area is eligible for this grant. However, the program is applicable to existing commercial uses, and basically a repeat of what we just said, but the property being of mixed use, residential, commercial, and meeting the 2-story requirement, again, aligns with the Brant County development plan here for CIP. When you look at 3.1.6.4 eligible costs, the potential grant value should be calculated based on the estimated value of any eligible costs, which may include. We are on record with a $2,519 request. I didn't highlight all of the items underneath, but I'm sure you gentlemen and lady are well familiar with the content. We upgraded the plumbing. We upgraded all the insulation doors and walls, fire protection. Everything on that list is a positive check mark as far as upgrades as a result of new construction and being in compliance with the county building codes. 3.16.8, design eligibility criteria. There are no applicable design eligibility criteria since this grant program focuses on building code related improvements. So we followed the building code. We are not in contravention. There's no question of whether or not the building was put up with any concerns. No one from the county or otherwise, council or otherwise, has ever indicated any concerns with the building. Personally, we have had hundreds of comments of what a beautiful building it is and how welcome it has been relative to that area that falls within your core development project plan here. 3.1.88, design eligibility. So any understanding of the proposed development or design may not be known at the time of application for a brownfield study grant. So again, going back to the brownfield question, we talked previous of a lot of the contamination issues that were here with the property, but at the same time, a question was raised about due diligence from the previous meeting, which I'll be honest with you, I take direct offense with. Until you sit down with the county on a 150-year-old building and you deal with people like Andre Gavel, you deal with people who are site control officers from the county who have the expertise and truly assess the building and come back to you with requests to meet. All the guidelines are not clearly identified with a building of that age. Yes, there were some surprises. Yes, we made significant upgrades, but at the entire benefit to everyone in the community that that building is robust, built to code, and falls within the criteria that the community was looking for. On
Excuse me, Mayor Bailey, we are coming up to 10 minutes shortly.
okay.
Thank you. If you could just wrap it up for us, Mark, please.
Well, so at the end of the day, gentlemen and lady, I guess I would like to say, when you look at, your vision and context, when we look at your entire plan here, I go right back to section 2.1 has land use here. Opportunities for new residential and commercial development, that is in line with the historic downtown heritage characters encouraged in downtown Burford. There's limited ability for the community to grow and provide additional commercial space and local customers due to private servicing in Burford. So I would review, I put a lot of time into this because it bothered me from the last meeting. And I guess I will summarize indicating that we are respectfully requesting the county's support in our request for a $2,519 grant under the terms of your downtown community revitalization plan, as it's documented here, and as of which I participated in the meetings, providing feedback and input and understanding what the county was looking for when we remediated this building.
Thank you, Mark.
For your consideration.
Thank you, Mark. If we could just have the other screen up now, please. Questions for Mark. Councillor, how is your first, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegation, and these are comments, not questions that require a response. But since the delegation took the time to educate us on our CIP program, I wanted to touch on 2 or 3 details specific to the CIP program. One is that I believe applications for CIP funding have to come in before the work is done. Number 2, I believe the work that was done on this property was done prior to 2019 when the CIP program was introduced in Burford. And the third
occupancy was August 30th of 2019.
The third is that so prior to 2019 there was no CIP program in Burford. And the third is that the applicant for a CIP grant needs to be the owner or tenant of the building.
Yeah, which is me.
Are you the current owner of the building?
In that period of 2019, this application, we've been talking about this over the last year. Yes. We're the owner of record at that time.
But you didn't apply for a CIP grant before the work was done or while you were the owner of the property?
Well, and that's very interesting because going through this process, I never got anything in the mail, any confirmation that the program had been finalized and formalized. Yes, we went through COVID. I talked to Michael Bradley on numerous occasions. I talked to Christine Staley on numerous occasions. I talked to Zach Gable. Nobody indicated you should fill out this document that this program has gone forward and formalized.
Thank you.
Fact.
Are there any, Councillor Pierce, you're next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question and a comment, if I could. So you stated that you were involved with the CIP and you went to the meetings when it was all beginning. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
You heard that correctly, yes.
Perfect. That's excellent, because within those meetings, you would have been advised that if in fact that you do want to get under the CIP with things, that you would reach out to the county. And if you were involved with those meetings, you would have known that it was actually finalized in the Burford area for the Burford downtown. So that's on that there, that's you've answered my question on that. You've stated you were involved with those meetings. So the information at those meetings would have advised you that if you wanted to apply for it, that you would reach out and then we would understand what it's going for. As Councillor Howes said, the work is to be done after the request for the CIP grant. This was not the case. And then my comment here, you kind of corrected yourself as you went along in your presentation, but I just wanted to, for the record, the statement you made was when you were talking about the CIP plans, you gentlemen have lived through most of this, was your words. Well, I'll just a correction there. There was ladies involved with that original CIP as well, many of the ladies, and they still are. So I just wanted to ensure that the gentlemen are more than just gentlemen that was involved with creating the CIP and going forward with it.
Acknowledged twice during my presentation.
Okay.
Are we
And
getting the technicalities here, or are we looking at what was actually done to that property and acknowledging it? That's all I'm asking for.
excuse
Let's
me,
be fair
excuse
and let's
me,
do business.
excuse me. I have the floor right now, and I would like to ask you one final question on this, okay? Do you feel there was anything in your presentation tonight that you have given us that you haven't given us in the previous times you've seen us?
Yes, I've identified the specifics that clearly align the property meets the requirements of a CIP improvement grant. That's all we're asking for. I'm not interested in technicalities.
Okay,
The
so
dates, the occupancy for the property was not until the end of August 2019.
okay, so
The
I
CIP was in place before.
I appreciate that answer, and my response to that answer is the fact that just because you are requesting the CIP doesn't necessarily mean you get it. Everybody that requests it does not get it. So I'm trying to understand through you what makes you think that you're above somebody else who hasn't received the grants. Not everybody that asks receives it.
I'm not going to repeat your words because I didn't say that. I said my property directly aligns with the requirement, the provisions laid out in the CIP grants. I'm not comparing to anybody else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ferrier, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the speaker, Mark. The question I have a question and a comment, but the question I have is that, it's really, I guess, for staff, but when we normally go through this process, folks apply for a CIP grant before the work is done, which Councillor House has already brought up, but they come to us as recommendations from staff. I don't think we've had anybody come to us, directly for a CIP grant. They work with staff, they go through staff make a recommendation, then we vote on whether we agree with the recommendation or not. So when the time comes, I have a suggestion that I'd make as a motion, if allowed to. The piece I have a difficult time with is, again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mark, this is our third presentation from you. It's been 3 presentations of 10 minutes of technicalities, and then to say, well, I'm not interested in technicalities. Like you brought lots of technical information, good for you, and you're allowed to. You can come back every month. And this is the problem I have, though, is that you've come to us in the past and said, I will keep coming until I get my $2,500. And that's a tough thing for us to deal with in terms of what do we say as stewards of the public purse if it almost feels like strong arming, right? And that's where I would like to make a recommendation and see if you're okay with this, sir, that staff do a report, staff do a recommendation on this instead of it being direct to council each time. And that if staff recommend we do this, then we go through that process. So they can go with whatever you've done, the CIP or the brownfield or whatever it might be, but to depoliticize this and depersonalize this, I think that might be the best way to do that. So it's not this, direct skipping the queue, coming directly to council when everybody else who's ever done a CIP grant has gone through staff and then staff make a recommendation. Is that a process that you think would be fair, Mr. Dramak?
I talked to Michael Bradley in depth before I followed this procedure, followed this process with you. So maybe that would be wise to have that conversation with Michael Bradley as well. Okay.
Okay. Is there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, how does council want to deal with this? Councillor Gatward?
Wait a second. Councillor Leverrier was making that motion, I believe he said.
So he'd be willing to.
He said he would be willing to when it became appropriate. And this is the time that it would become appropriate. If you had no questions, your hand was in the air. Thought you had a question.
I don't have a question.
Okay, so what are we going to do with this? Councillor Ferrier?
I'd like to task staff with making a recommendation on this and the brownfield grants, one way or the other, that we would then vote on. And hopefully that takes 2 to 3 cycles so that we're not just coming back every month. Like, we'd actually be working on something. And when it comes to us, then to vote as we would other things.
Okay, seeking a seconder. Councillor Gatward. Okay, we have it seconded on the floor. I think Councillor Coleman has something to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will not support this motion that is on the floor right at the moment. I was going to say that before. So That's my concern.
All right. Any other comments or questions before we call the vote? Okay, we'll call Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A comment, if I may. I think Mark's idea to depersonalize it, desensitize it is a good one. My concern is that if the answer comes back that staff don't recommend a grant, that Mr. Dremack will keep coming back. And I don't want that. I simply don't want that. I think it's actually now taking up council time we're just seeing a repeat performance. And I think we have to come straight to the point and say there is no grant, or we get from Mr. Dremack his willingness to accept the report and the council's decision on that report. If he won't say he'll accept it, I think we're just wasting our time.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. We have something on the floor. It has been seconded by Councillor Gatward. I'm going to call the vote. Is there any support to Councillor LaFerriere?
It's 3, 4. Oh, look at us.
Okay, against it? Okay, it was defeated. Councillor Bell, do you want to make a motion?
My motion, I'm not quite sure how to construct it, but this is the third time we've heard from Mr. Dremack. It's the third time that we've essentially said no. I don't know how many more times we have to say no, but I understand that he has rights to come back to council each and every time he wants, but we are wasting our time, and I want us to find the right word to say, let's stop this process.
All right. That's not really a motion. That's more of a comment, but is there a motion coming forward? If not, Councillor Chambers?
Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering if the clerk could advise council on the procedures around reconsideration of votes that we've already taken.
Heather?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So where we're at in terms of votes, reconsideration would be required if we wanted to go back. We have 2 motions to not approve the original grant request, and I believe the motion for the brownfields thing was defeated as well. I'd have to double check, but at any rate, we would need reconsideration. The way, and I get where Councillor Chambers is coming from. So if we do a motion to reconsider and we approve to reconsider, we can do that once in a year. So if we do a reconsideration, we approve the reconsideration, then we vote on whether or not to approve a grant. Whatever that decision is final for a year. We can't have any more discussion on it for another year. Where we've fallen down is because the requests for reconsideration were refused by council, were defeated. We never did a reconsideration. So we still have 1 reconsideration that we can do within the year. But after that, it would be a closed matter for 1-year term, or until the new term of council, which we're getting close to. It could be either one comes first.
And if it fails, Heather, then what happens?
Well, if someone puts a motion to reconsider on the table and it doesn't get the 2/3 majority it needs, then we're still in the same loop, because we can ask for reconsiderations again and again and again until we get one. And then once you have a reconsideration and you do a vote on the matter again, then it's closed for a year. That's the way it's outlined, is you can only reconsider something once, but we keep doing the reconsideration votes and the reconsideration votes get turned down. So we've never actually reconsidered.
Thank you. With that being said, is there anyone that has maybe just a motion to receive tonight's? Yeah, Councillor House, just a motion to receive?
No, sir.
Okay.
I move that we refuse the request for CIP funding.
Seconded by Councillor Wheat. And does anyone want to speak to that before we vote? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And it's carried. Thank you.
Unbelievable.
Moving on to number 5, please. Adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. Councillor Chambers, I think you have that.
Yes, I do, and it's seconded by Councilor Laferriere that the minutes be adopted, all three sets.
Yep, June 22nd, July 13th, and July 20th. Are there any questions on any of those sets of minutes? Seeing none, we'll call the vote to receive all three. Anyone opposed? And they're carried. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the minutes? No? Seeing none, we'll move on. Consent items. Consent items to be approved. Councillor Wheat, you have those.
That's moved by myself, second by Councillor Collin, that the four consent items be received to approve.
Does anyone want anything separated of those four? See, Councillor Miller?
I don't need anything separated, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to ask a question on 711.
All right.
That's the J Wells Park. And we had set aside, or staff had set aside $260,000. This is a question of a general nature, but I thought this was a really good example. And it was $75,000 over what was budgeted, which is almost 30%, and a lot of that was attributed to higher prices, shortages, and whatnot. And I'm just wondering, going into staff's now going into the 2022 budget, are we taking that into account? Are we expecting to see those kinds of increases, do we think, for 2022? I'm a little bit nervous when I read this. Like I say, it's a general question, but I thought this was a really good example.
Cindy, do you have a good answer to a good question?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miller, we do look at the capital budget every year. So we do have the 10-year forecast, but every year we relook at what was budgeted over the 10 years and really specifically in more detail what was budgeted for the following year. Given some of the price increases that we've seen this year, we likely will be adjusting some of the projects within the budget for 2022 that were projected. So I can speak on behalf of Parks and Facilities, but I see that Mr. Walton has jumped on, so he may have some additional information.
Yeah, and I appreciate the answer through you, Mr. Mayor, to Cindy. I appreciate the answer, but yeah, that's why I'm concerned about all departments, and yeah, Public Works is obviously the largest driver of a lot of our budgeting. So I'm just, like I say, the question is open to any staff, obviously, if the mayor allows, but is that something that you guys are now in the middle of? Are you guys accounting for this in the budget process?
Yep, Mr. Walton, you're here. You're the one with the answers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miller. We always do our best to adjust budgets as we go forward. You'll note the next report on the agenda has a project which we brought in under budget. It's really hard though. When we're doing the budgets, we don't even have the drawings done on some of these projects. So you'll see reports come forward to council, and there'll be explanations sometimes as why they're over or under budget. Some of them are because the design was done well after the actual the initial estimating was done for the budget. But we do always try and adjust the unit prices and the benchmark prices for projects as we go ahead, and as we get further along in the drawings, we try and do our best. Doesn't always work. And if you went back over all the tender awards this year, that we had a couple that were substantially over, and we had a couple that were substantially under. So, and then some which were close. So the answer to your question is yes, we do our best as we go along.
It's just sticker shock sometimes when I read some of these reports. So I appreciate the answer, Cindy and Bob. Thank you.
Councillor Gatward, do you have a question before we call the vote?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor, on the BIA item 7.1.4. I don't know the members that are being appointed. However, I wanted to ask, when they elect these members, do all the membership, and I don't know how they do it through the BIA, do all the membership get to vote on the executive through you to, I guess, Councillor Bell?
Councillor Bell, you're on mute.
I can give an answer, but Heather can jump in if need to be. Nominations for the executive were polled in the weeks prior to the AGM. Every member of the BIA was invited to the AGM. Those people that vote are those that attend the AGM and not those that don't. And Heather, have I got that correct?
Through the mayor, we did allow members this time to also vote in advance by phone. We accepted votes by phone or over the Zoom call at the AGM.
Thank you.
Thank
you. I just wondered. I had no idea how they did it. So thank you for that answer. It's representative of what the BIA wants. So if they want it, I'm supportive.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll call a vote on all four, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Consent items to be received. Councillor Howes, you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine that consent items 7.2.1 to 7.2.11 be received as information.
Does anyone want, yeah, Councillor Miller, you're going to separate one for me?
Yeah, this time definitely. 7.2.1, please.
Thank you. Are there any others that are going to be separated? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on everything but 7.2.1. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Let's talk about 7.2.1, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's easy enough to receive a no from one of the ministers. Except it has to do with the natural gas. And I just want to draw council's attention to one item written there by the minister, where and I wrote it down. He said that economically viable municipalities may want to consider what they can do to assist with the economics of projects in their areas. I think what he's saying there is either put up or shut up. We've asked the province for help. We're not getting any help. I think we as a municipality got to kind of look maybe inwards and see what we can do to assist residences and businesses without gas to get gas. And I think as a municipality, there's a lot we can do to help whether it's Enbridge or it's Six Nations gas. I'm not sure of the name of that. To maybe look at some projects in our area. So what I'm going to ask is if we could get staff maybe to work with the utilities to maybe make one of these or 2 or 3 projects viable in the county. There's lots of things we can do. We could look at a direct grant, and I certainly would be willing to look at a budget amount. I mean, if you look at the community improvement project, some of these are up to $25,000 for one business. I think I wouldn't want to spend that much per business to bring gas, but I think we could certainly spend somewhere in that neighborhood. We could look at foregoing possibly property taxes on the pipelines for 20 years. We could organize residences and businesses maybe to help contribute to the cost of the capital cost, or some combination of all three. But we just had a project there with Six Nations Gas where they are hooking up a few of our residences and businesses. And I'm just wondering, I'm not wondering, I honestly believe that there's some projects that might be viable in our municipality if we could help it make it so. So what I would like to ask Mr. Mayor, and this is a motion, is that we receive this communication, but that we ask one of our staff members if they could look into working with Enbridge and with Six Nations Gas to see what we as a municipality can do to make gas projects viable here in the county, and then possibly bringing that up at the 2022 budget. So that's my motion, and I hope it gets a seconder for that.
I'm looking for a second. I see Councillor Pierce came back on to second that for you. Are there any other questions to that request by Councillor Miller? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those, Councillor Miller?
I just want to point out, I think we all know the benefits of natural gas. I think we know the competitive disadvantage people have that aren't on it. I know we're putting some money into our downtown cores. The places without gas are not in the downtown core. So I see this, it's kind of an evening out, but it really does go to the heart of the matter of, like I say, helping out, well, our citizens, whether they're business or residents or a farm for that matter. So.
No, I think it's a great idea. It wasn't hard to get a seconder, and I think if staff brings us back the numbers of people that would be interested, first of all, and different options of wrapping services around the people that want it, and costs related to it, I think it's great. I think it's easy to support your motion. So, with that being said, all those in favor? Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's great. You've got all the right staff watching tonight, so thank you. Committee reports. The first one is Planning and Development Committee report of July the 6th, and that's Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor House, that the Planning and Development Committee report of July 6th, 2021 be approved, noting that there are 7 recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Councillor Miller's report? Seeing none, we'll call the vote to receive. All those in favor? Anybody
Mr. Mayor,
opposed?
I will.
Yep. Councillor
I just
Miller?
want to point out, in our communications, there was a letter from Armstrong Planning regarding Brant Stars in St. George, and that matter has been addressed if anybody was following that. So
good. Moving on to 8.2, Policy Development and Strategic Decision Committee, and that's Councillor McAlpine from July the 13th.
Moved by myself and second by Councillor Wheat that the Policy and Development and Strategic Direction Committee report be approved.
Are there any questions to Councillor McAlpine or his report? Seeing none, call the vote to receive it. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question regarding the minutes from the Policy and Development meeting, not regarding anything on the report, but 8.1 on page 117. I believe the General Manager of Community Services was going to check and confirm if the daycare would have access to the storage building for the fire department and the community center. And I'm wondering if they have confirmed that or not.
Cindy, have we confirmed who's getting into that closet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gatward. The equipment is for the municipality and not for the daycare. So only the municipality would have access to the storage shed.
Thank you for that reassurance.
Thanks, Councillor Gatward. Moving on to 8.3, Administration and Operations Committee, Councillor Pierce of July the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Miller that the Administration and Operations Committee report of July 20th be approved, noting there are 7 recommendations.
Thank you. Are there questions to Councillor Pierce? Seeing none, we'll call the vote to receive the report. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone opposed? No. Carried. Thank you. Paramedic Services Committee report of July the 20th. 21st. That's Councillor Laferriere. Noting that there was a recommendation that wasn't in your package, but was distributed electronically this afternoon that Councillor is going to speak to. So, Councillor?
Moved by myself and second by Councillor Pierce that the Paramedic Service Committee report of July 21st, 2021 be approved with the addendum that was sent as Mayor Bailey has just stated.
Yep. Do you want to read the recommendation again or just leave it for people to hopefully
I think it's fine as is. We sent the actual details of the agreement. We're just going to enter into a formalized agreement with Six Nations paramedics for when they cover us and we cover them. We've been doing so anyway. We're just formalizing it as we've done with many other municipalities.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you or to you and Chairman Laferriere. The Six Nations paramedic services, they are covered by the province. They don't pay for their ambulance service. However, we do, and the city does. It's a joint service that's run between and paid for by both municipalities. And in my mind, because the Six Nations do not pay for their ambulance service and the taxpayers pay for it, by them requesting us to do a cross-border billing agreement, they are being paid twice for services that they provide with their ambulance service. They're being paid by the province, and they're going to be also, if we pass this agreement, be paid by the county and the city. And it's like double dipping. And I don't agree with that.
There's a couple of misnomers there, if I can, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
First of all, we actually, the province covers 50% of our budget for paramedic services as well. So to say that it's double dipping, then I guess we're half dipping as well, because it is a cross-border agreement where they would be paying us and we would be paying them when we utilize each other's services. They, like us, despite where their funding comes from, being provincial and ours being half provincial, they still have a budget that is set by the funder, the same way we have a budget that's set by the funder, and they have to meet that budgetary response. I don't presume to and won't speak for Six Nations, and you're more than welcome to email or call Six Nations themselves too to get clarification on that. But this question came up during the meeting, which is available on YouTube from some Brantford councillors, and it was basically that this is very normalized. And again, they still have a budget. We have a budget. Their funding and our funding, a lot of it comes from the same pot, but we do this with every other municipality except Waterloo, because they don't do them at all, that has these sort of agreements. So again, this is not anything new. It's something we're doing anyway. If you have a bigger issue with how the province funds another municipality or another group or reserve, then I would suggest taking that up with the province. But again, this isn't about the province. This is about us and them and making sure we're paid and they're paid when we use each other's services. That's how I look at it.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I sat on the ambulance committee for a number of years, and I do realize the province covers municipalities throughout the province 50% of the bill, or close to it. Sometimes it's not always 50%. And they have that agreement with municipalities throughout the province of Ontario. When we cross-border bill, I don't believe we only cross-border bill for our 50%. And I know there's a standardized number, which I read in the report, which they use. But years ago, when this was originally talked about in cross-border billing, and Charles Longeway was the ambulance manager, the committee looked at this and said, well, they don't pay, so why should they be paid again? And I still agree with that philosophy, because the taxpayers are paying for those cross-border calls that Six Nations are doing twice. So I'm sorry, I can't support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Councillor Miller and then Councillor Pierce.
Two things, Mr. Mayor. One just general comment. In reading the minutes and all that, from the ambulance, from the paramedic meeting, they talked about make sure we ask David Neal and Paul Emerson about the wait times. So they weren't here tonight, so we couldn't ask that. But when they come next, make sure everybody has their questions ready. But I wanted to ask, in the discussion about the agreement, it was mentioned, but there was no context to it, about Waterloo, the region of Waterloo, not having any cross-border agreements. And why is that? Is it related to, is it touching on what Councillor Gatward talked about, double dipping 50% of the time? Or like I say, was there any context to why Waterloo doesn't have any agreements with any neighboring municipalities? I was interested to read that, and that's why I wondered why do we have this one in front of us?
I think that's a good question for staff. Cindy?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Bailey, to Councillor Miller. The cross-border billing agreements are not required by the province. They're something that municipality may opt into. So the region of Waterloo has chosen not to opt into any cross-border billing agreements with any other municipality. You know, I guess they have their own reasoning for that. Every single one of our other neighbors, we do have an agreement with, as Councillor Laferriere stated, and all those agreements are nearly identical to one another.
Councillor Miller, you.
Well, I appreciate the answer. I don't, but I don't have an answer to the question, I guess. Cindy is saying she doesn't know why they don't do it. So I was hoping to find out, like I say, because it brings me back to why is this agreement in front of us? But and I understand we have agreements with every other neighboring municipality. So I'll do some homework on my own. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. Councillor Pierce and then Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So a couple comments on it. The understanding that came to the meeting was the fact of just kind of what Cindy said there. The province doesn't dictate that an agreement has to be completed. That is the choice of the municipalities. And part of that choice in making the agreements is the fact that if in fact you need an ambulance to come, they will come. And to Councillor Gatward's comment there about the double dipping, there was a statement made at the meeting that was said that any payment back to Six Nations must stay within the ambulance service. So it's not whether it's double dipping or half dipping or whatever you want to call it, it stays within the ambulance service. And at the end of the day, I'm more than happy to support this motion because I would like to know that if in fact we are at a zero ambulance situation, which unfortunately we're there much more than we would like to be, that we have our friends in Six Nations that are going to come and send an ambulance to somebody that may be your family or my family that's in need of an ambulance. So I don't think this is a big deal to approve this agreement, and I'll be fully supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Just to clarify, Waterloo doesn't have an agreement, but they still would submit an invoice and be paid, would they not?
I would think so. Cindy, would you know that?
It's what I'm getting at. But I'm sorry.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Bailey. There is no exchange of monies between the municipalities because there is no agreement in place. So
then the clarification is, in order for invoices and billing to be traded, you have to have an agreement. If you don't have an agreement, they don't pay us and we don't pay them. They just provide the services that as they are needed or come up.
Through you, Mayor Bailey, yes, that's correct.
So if someone in Glen Morris calls an ambulance and the closest one is in the region, just because they don't have an agreement or they don't get paid doesn't mean that they're not going to come if they're dispatched the closest ambulance. Is that correct?
That's correct. They would be dispatched through the central ambulance call center.
It's a little frightening, but it sounds like it's true. Councillor Ferrier.
Yeah, just one other piece of information that might be helpful and germane to this part of the conversation is we heard from about another municipality, not Waterloo, but another that didn't have agreements, and they were billed by a neighboring municipality for $400,000 and just refused to pay it. So again, for sort of the stewards of the public purse and for the idea of having some formalization so that there's predictability, you know, it's better. I think we've taken a tact as a county that it's better to have an agreement than to not have one overall, and just to standardize things and have predictability.
Thank you. Are there any other questions to Councillor's report? Seeing none, we'll call the vote to receive it. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you. Moving on to number 10, communications. We have, well, we can read them. Communication, we have the parking, the river parking list of people. Councillor House, you want to speak to that?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I find this very interesting because it's we've had people resist some of the changes we've made to parking specific to like all over the county related to snow clearing and that we've seen some other resistance. This is probably the first time where we've seen it's either 90 or 100% of the residents have resisted. But I wanted to ask staff, presumably through Rob Walton, if it appears that the residents believe that the changes to the parking on Elm Street were somewhat related to the canoe, you know, our canoe management situation, and I'm wondering if maybe it's actually specific to our snow clearing changes, which are happening in other parts of the county, and some like it, some don't, but you know, we've decided it's a necessary move for a road cleaning safety. But anyway, I was just wondering if Rob could speak a little bit to that, just so we can understand this clearly. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Walton, you're here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor House. We are in the final phases of making the changes to parking. It was not all done in one fell swoop. Over the last couple of years, there has been a couple of phases in doing that, and this area is being proposed now. So it was related to the snow clearing, yes. It was already being proposed for that.
Oh, okay. All right. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that. I just, and I hope some of the residents are watching, and just because I know they were making some points about, yeah, it says the original, for people who maybe are watching who haven't seen this, the original purpose as decreed by Brant County is to limit parking to the east side of the street in order to reduce the amount of visitor parking, primarily for canoe access to Penman's Dam. And then they further go on to state, contrary to what the county council may have been informed, parking by canoeists on Elm Street was never a problem. So that they may have some misinformation there, or a misinterpretation of it. I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is 2 blocks from where I live, and I've spoken to a few of the people on that street, and I know we've talked about how this wasn't for canoeing, but that's not everybody's understanding, apparently. That said, I will say this, that the moving to one side of the street for parking throughout the year, and not just for winter clearing, but also safety, ticketing, patrols of bylaw, things like that, we haven't actually received that many complaints. This is the biggest piece, and while, you know, the number 90 to 100% of a street, that sounds massive, but it's a very small street. It's a 1.5 block street. So I'm actually very impressed, generally speaking, by how people have taken to, or at least been open-minded to, giving a year or two to the one side street parking. all over the county, but also in Paris, specifically in our ward. So this seems to be a bit of an outlier, and I can understand it feeling like it's about the canoeing and it's about river access, but it wasn't. It was just made now instead of a little later because we were doing so much change around river access. It made no sense to do that and then have this change come 2 or 3 months later. But yes, so I'd like to move to just receive his information.
Seeking a seconder. Councillor House. Is there any other comments? No, seeing none. Oh, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Rob. Rob, the residents seem to think they got this under control, and when the snow is coming, their cars are off the road. Is that our experience?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell. No, and I think the original report on this, the change to one side parking came as far back maybe as 2018, and we've been doing this in phases. So not sure what's going on there. So no, it is not, and you only have to have a few out there to cause real problems. So, and it's the whole thing of switching from side to side and then dealing with the ice. So there's a number of issues associated with it.
Thank you. Any other comments? We have it on the floor to receive his information. It has a seconder. Call the vote. All those in favor to receive the petition? Thank you. 11.1, Councillor Coleman, you have a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's moved by myself, second by Councillor Miller, and a resolution regarding rural internet. And when there's a chance, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak to it.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I'm appreciative of the province and SWIFT for what they have done in the past and whatnot, but it's become more evident in this past year and a half since COVID has hit, especially the rural areas for people that are home, trying to educate your children at home, looking for high-speed internet to keep up with the things. And I'm appreciative of what SWIFT has done and what is doing. And I'm looking at myself, and I'm only less than a stone's throw away from initiative that SWIFT is doing, and I can't get high-speed internet. I guess that's because of the damn river. But I want to say thank you to the CAO, because he's the one that had the brains to write this and put this together. It sure wasn't me, but it's well appreciated, and I hope for your support, and I appreciate what's all going on in all the other communications. But we need to keep pushing for higher speed internet, especially in the rural areas. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I think it's great. Oh, Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just speaking to SWIFT, I hear Brian has a little frustration in his voice, but I had the discussion with Brian before. But I think it should be made clear that SWIFT worked with what they had, right? They only were having so much money. And they did. I've sat at the SWIFT board. I'm not saying this because I'm a board member, but because I can see and I read what they've done, and they've taken every dollar and they stretched it as far as they can. And they've done an excellent job, and they reached underserved areas. They made sure. So they had a lot of homework to do to make sure they were getting they were making proper use of every tax dollar that they were given. And I'm telling you, if every department in government did that, we wouldn't even know what a deficit or a debt was, because these guys have done a great job. But SWIFT recognizes that they can't be the best they could do is, I think, and I know I mentioned it around this table, it's around 23% or something like that of the ones that are not served. So that leaves 77%. Again, myself included, that won't get served. Councillor Coleman as well, through this SWIFT thing. But SWIFT has been pushing as well for further funding, and we know that's coming. So I don't think this resolution is going to hurt. The more pressure we put on them, the better. And if you really want to disrupt a family, take away even their crappy internet for a couple of days, and it's you appreciate what a necessity it is anymore.
Councillor Coleman.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, and further to Councillor Miller, I am frustrated, but not as bad as my voice may sound. I relate this to what the CAO said last week when we were talking about some government funding. They give us a toolbox, but they haven't put all the tools in it. And I think that was well said, and I remembered that, and I think this is the same thing, is we just need more tools. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think it's always good to reach out to the people that you've got copied on this, Councillor Coleman, are all the right people. That's the unfortunate part of COVID, is we would be meeting with them at our conventions and they would see, the sincerity and the plea. And that's what we're missing by not being able to see people face to face. But it's going to all the right people. I think it was well written, and hopefully it'll be well supported. With that being said, it's on the floor. It has a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Coleman, for bringing this forward. Number 12, I didn't ask, but no one's jumped the queue to say they had anything for new business. But if you do, speak now or forever hold your peace. Nope. We'll move on then to 13, and that's in camera. Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell, you're muted.
I move that we go into camera.
And it's seconded by Councillor Chambers. All those in favor? We're going to move into camera. Thank you. Do we want to take a break?
No.
Put up your hands if you want to take a break. I can't see your hands now anyway. They've split my screen.
It's just Gary calling you, Mayor Bailey, to get you back in the breakout room.
Oh, okay. I'm here.
Hey, would you see breakout rooms as an option on the bottom of your screen?
No,
Oh, you are. You don't. Okay.
no, I just have the,
I see Councillor Bell and Councillor Gatward now.
yep.
Okay, I'm going back into a breakout room, so nobody decline. I think if something comes up, don't
Just leave.
decline the invite. Yeah, just wait until it comes.
Who am I with over here? Anybody? Guess I'm with all my friends. I'm going to step away for 2 minutes.
There he is.
Yeah, 1 sec. Now I gotta go back in camera. Okay. Gary, we are going back in open session this time for real.
Mosquitoes are starting to come out.
Gary, are we back live or do you want to minute?
Just while we're waiting to go live, Councillor Bell, quick question for you. So my son-in-law received an email today regarding his second dose at the Paris Fairgrounds was canceled. What's going on with that?
Councillor Pierce, just so you know, we are live.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know we were live yet.
Okay. Okay, we are back live. Just a note that Councillor Ferrier will be presenting a motion to ratify some decisions made in camera. Mayor Bailey and Councillor Pierce have both declared a pecuniary interest with relation to one or more of those items and will be refraining from discussion and voting on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I can't see anyone. Not sure. Oh, now I can. Thank you, whoever did that. Okay, we're back in open session. Councillor Ferrier, you want to do that now, please?
Thank you.
Ratification.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that the following decisions made in camera at the County of Brant Council meeting on July 27th, 2021 be approved. 1, Policy Development and Strategic Development Committee in camera confidential report item number 1, the purchase of 2 Beverly Street West in St. George. Number 2 is the Administration and Operation Committee in camera confidential report with items. 1 is the purchase of land for the Newport River access. 1 is the purchase of land for a water tower in the vicinity of Rest Acres Road and Highway 403. And 1 is a purchase of land at 6 Paris Links Road. And number 3 is the approval of staff report RPT number 21-212 to enter into a collective agreement with the Power Workers Union.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? It's passed. Thank you. Number 14 is the bylaws. Councillor Gatward, you have them?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you, I do. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Ferrier, that bylaws 82-21 to 94-21 be now read a first time.
Does anyone want anything separated? Any of the bylaws? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor of the first reading? Councillor Gatward, the second reading, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor LaFerriere, that bylaws 82-21 to 94-21 be now read a second time and all clauses and preambles be adopted.
Thank you. Are there any questions before we ask Councillor Gatward to read for the third time of any of the bylaws? Seeing none, all those in favor of the second reading? And you could wrap it up with the third reading, Councillor Gatward.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor LaFerriere, that bylaws 92-21, or sorry, 82-21 to 94-21 be now read a third time, passed, signed, and executed.
Thank you. All those in favor of the third reading of the bylaws? Thank you. That's passed. Moving to number 15 on the agenda, which is the next meeting in the adjournment. I guess the next meeting is September the 28th. If anything exciting or necessary happens before then, it'll be a call of the chair. I'll call a special council meeting and we'll come back as a full council if we need to. Before we
Isn't that a
say,
count? Isn't that
Pardon
a
me?
council meeting on, is that a council meeting on Thursday? No,
it's a special council meeting, isn't it?
but it's council though, just to be clear.
Yeah, but it's a special council meeting, just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's not a council meeting. So we would call it a regular council meeting as call of the chair if we need to before September 28th. 28th? 28th. Okay, I would just, if we're not going to be meeting for a little while, other than the special meeting, I'd just like to thank staff for everything they've done to get us through these crazy days of COVID with closing things and opening things and sanitizing things. We've come through it very, very well. Thank you to Councillor Bell for all he does at the health unit. If you could see him in action, he runs a pretty tight ship down there and he's doing a great job. So my personal thanks to Councillor Bell for all he does and staff for all they're doing. And with that being said, I can adjourn my own